4 autocannon muzzles came level with the gate, and Lyle Karsten understood that he was going to die at home. 100 tons of battle mech stood at his wire in bare gray primer. No crest, no numbers, no flag, nothing his targeting computer could name. A voice opened on the guard channel, mild and unhurried. A man reading from a form. It told him to power down and walk out. It gave him 1 minute. His thumb found the trigger, and his mouth stayed shut. He had no answer. The wind dragged powder snow off the moraine and rattled it against the Marauder's canopy like sand. Karsten had heard that sound every day for 30 years, and it had never once meant anything. Now it was the only sound in the world, and under it, through the frame of the command couch, he could feel the ground taking the weight of that machine. He knew every mech in the inner sphere. He did not know this one. That was the part that frightened him. Not the guns, but the fact that it had no name. Captain. Sanayaro's voice, thin on the internal net. They're not squawking. No transponder. Nothing on any band. They just walked over the ridge. How many? 6 mechs. 2 haulers and a command track behind them. She stopped. He heard her swallow. Sir, they're moving in 6s. He filed that. He did not know yet what it meant, and the minute was running. Karsten keyed the guard channel. This is Iron Spike Actual. Identify yourself. Good morning, Captain Karsten. The voice was so ordinary it was obscene. A dry, careful, apologetic voice. The voice of a man who worked in a room with filing cabinets and a window that did not open. My name is Deering. I'm the reviewing officer. I'd like to come out and speak with you face to face. I would rather do this properly. Do what properly? Close the file, said Deering. The 100-ton machine did not move. Its arms did not come down. Karsten stared at the 4 muzzles and at 11.5 tons of armor that had never once been scratched, and thought, with a clarity that surprised him, that he was looking at the cleanest object he had ever seen in his life. Come ahead, he said. He shut the Marauder down and climbed out, and the cold took him by the throat, and he walked to his own gate on his own legs and stood in the open where 4 autocannons could reach him. The gate was 2 panels of corrugated steel on a rolling track. It had rusted through in 9 places, and Corporal Hugh Ottaway had welded a patch over every one, and every patch had rusted too. Above it hung a hand-lettered board, Iron Spike Brigade, Reclamation Annex 9. Colonel Wendell Aubrey had painted it in the first winter. Aubrey had been dead 18 years. Deering came out of the command track on foot, a slight man in a gray coat with no insignia, no rank, no patch. He carried a document case and crossed the frozen gravel with the careful gait of a man who has never been shot at. He took off 1 glove to shake Karsten's hand, and his hand was very cold. Thank you, he said. I mean that. Most men would have shot. Most men aren't 61. Deering smiled a little, as though that were a joke they were sharing. Then he took a single sheet of heavy paper from the case, printed, not screened, and held it out. Karsten read it in the wind. It was an order of closure. 4 paragraphs long. It stated that the security element presently occupying Reclamation Annex 9, Gladstone, Small World, was to be disarmed, its materiel impounded, and its personnel processed. It cited a contract by number. The number was right. Karsten had that number in a safe 40 meters behind him, and he had read it 1,000 times. And at the bottom, above a line, was a signature block. BY Order of the Board of Reclamation. Karsten stood in the wind and looked at those 5 words, and something cold and patient began to open in the middle of his chest. That's the same authority that hired us. Yes, Deering said, then produced them. He held the paper out and did not let his hand shake, and it cost him something. You want 7 battle mechs and 41 people on the word of a piece of paper. Produce the authority. Get me a man from the Board of Reclamation on a live channel, or a filed copy of my own contract, and I'll walk my people out with their hands on their heads. That's mercenary law, Mr. Deering. You don't take a unit's machines without an instrument. There was a long silence. Behind Deering, the gray machine stood absolutely still, and the powder snow ran past its ankles in long white ropes. Captain, Deering said at last, and his voice was gentle, and that was the worst of it. I don't think you understand what has happened to you. Then explain it. Produce your contract, said Deering. Karsten opened his mouth and closed it. You have a copy, I know you do. Bring it to me, with the registry entry, the escrow record, the bonding certificate, the filing number at the district seat. Bring me anything at all with your unit's name on it that was not written by you. He put his glove back on, finger by finger. You have until first light. I'm authorized to transport your personnel off-world. There's a manifest. I'll send it across. He paused. Captain, I have done this 11 times. 9 of those units walked out. And the other 2? Deering looked at him with something that was almost kindness. There were no other 2, he said. That's the point. He walked back to the command track. The gray machine took one long, ponderous step backward and did not lower its guns. And Karsten went back through his gate and looked at the 30 years of his life spread out in front of him. 6 prefabricated barracks with snow banked to the sills. A mech bay with a hole in the roof that Novotny had topped over in 3026. A vegetable house glowing yellow in the gray morning, where Ines Salcedo grew tomatoes that tasted of nothing at all. Behind it, the pump house and the pipe running down the slope to Kettle Lake, 4 kilometers of wind-scoured ice with a low sun sitting on it, and beyond the eastern wire, cut into the shoulder of Aubrey Ridge, the concrete face of the annex, 60 meters of it, blank, 1 sealed door, and a warning plate in a language nobody read anymore. They had guarded that door for 30 years. Nobody had ever opened it. Nobody had ever come. Karsten went to find his officers. They met in the mess because the mess had a stove. Lieutenant Odile Sokolov, 29, born in the 2nd Barracks, never once off this world. Commissioned by Karsten himself because there had been nobody else to do it. Sergeant Aldo Whitlock, who had been thin once. Sergeant Ines Salcedo. Teo Marchetti, 24, who had a daughter. Neve Petrakis, 19. Corporal Hugh Ottaway, older than Karsten, never once late for a watch, and Helena Novotny, 72, chief technician, the only living person who had seen the contract signed. Karsten put the order of closure on the table. They read it. Nobody spoke. Facts, he said. Yarrow. Sana Yarrow had a data slate and hands that would not stay still. The quarterly payment didn't come 3 months ago. I filed an inquiry through the Hyperpulse station at Bantry. Full priority, paid out of the operating account. The station accepted it. She swallowed. I checked the receipt this morning. There's no record of transmission. There's no record of the inquiry. There's no record of the account. Say that again. The operating account is closed, not overdrawn. Closed, with no history behind it. 30 years of quarterly transfers, and the ledger says it was opened and closed on the same day. And the day is last month. She looked up. It's not that they took our money, sir. It's that they took the fact that there ever was any. Oh, Dill, I drove to Bantry yesterday. District Registry. Sokolov's voice was flat, and Karsten knew her well enough to hear what it cost. There is no Iron Spike Brigade. There's no land grant on Aubrey Ridge. The parcel is listed as unallocated Crown land. I asked the registrar to search the Board of Reclamation. She stopped. There is no Board of Reclamation. Not dissolved, not superseded, not renamed. It has never existed. Not under the Confederation. Not under the Republic. Not under the Commonwealth. She laid her hands flat on the table. Sir, I have been paid every quarter of my adult life by an organization that was never real. Karsten looked at the stove and thought about the flags. He had come here as a corporal of infantry in the summer of 3009, 31 years old, with a rifle and a duffel and a bad attitude. And the flag over the district seat at Bantry had been the green of the Capellan Confederation. And the world belonged to House Liao, and always would. 20 years later, the Fourth Succession War came and went, somewhere far away. And in March of 3029, a man named Pavel Redzik made a country out of the leftovers of the Tikhonov commonality. And for 2 years, the flag over Bantry was the flag of the Tikhonov Free Republic. Karsten had watched them raise it. He had thought it was ugly. Then Ridzik was murdered. The Republic voted itself out of existence in September of 3031, and the sword and mailed fist of the Federated Commonwealth went up in its place. Nobody ever came out to Aubrey Ridge to ask who they were. 3 flags, 1 contract. 30 years. Helena, you were there. Who did Aubrey sign with? Novotny had her hands wrapped around a tin cup. Her knuckles were the size of walnuts. A man in a gray coat, she said. The stove ticked. That's all you remember? Lyle, I remember everything. She looked at him with those flat, pale eyes. A table in a hotel in New Mariota. A man in a gray coat with no insignia. A document case. Very polite. Wendell was 53, and we'd been 6 months out of contract and eating our own spare parts. And this man offered 30 years. Firm, quarterly, no combat clause, garrison and installation. Wendell would have signed with the devil that afternoon. Her mouth moved. I remember thinking, nobody signs 30 years. 30 years is what you give a man when you don't expect to have to think about him again. Karsten sent for the safe. Inside were the only objects in the universe that said the Iron Spike Brigade had ever drawn breath. A muster roll, 30 years of ration receipts on flimsy paper, Novotny's ice logs, a death roll with 22 names on it in 3 different hands, because 3 different people had been given the job, and the contract. He put it on the table. 6 pages. He read it now with the eyes of a man who has just learned that everything he knows is a set built for him. It specified the parcel, the duration, the payment schedule, the maintenance stipend, the resupply channel, and a chain of command that ran, as far as he could tell, to nobody. And on page 4, in clause 19, under termination, it said this: provisions for the release, disarmament, transport, and final disposition of the security element are set out in Annex 9, which is incorporated herein by reference and forms part of this instrument. Karsten had been reading that sentence for 3 decades. He turned to the back. There was no Annex 9. There had never been an Annex 9. It was not attached, and it never had been, and when he was younger he had written 3 letters about it, and no one had ever answered. He sat looking at the words, Annex 9. And then he looked up, past the mess window, past the wire at 60 meters of blank concrete cut into the shoulder of Aubrey Ridge, at the sealed door with no windows and the warning plate in a language nobody read. Reclamation Annex 9. "Oh," he said. "Sir, it's not a clause." He noticed that he was very calm, the way you notice the temperature of water when you have already fallen in. Annex 9 isn't a clause. It's a building. The terms for what happens to us at the end of this contract have been sitting behind that door for 30 years, and we've been standing outside it with rifles, keeping people away from them. Nobody said anything. "That's the joke," he said. "To read my own contract, I have to open the one door I was hired to keep shut." Marchetti stood so fast his chair went over. "Then we open it, we cut it, and we take the paper to Bantry, and we put it in front of every clerk and every news feed and every drunk in the district." "Sit down, Teo." Karsten did not raise his voice. Marchetti sat. 60 centimeters of ferrocrete over a hardened frame. "We have never owned a cutting rig that could touch it. 4 days' work. Then we have 12 hours. The stove ticked. "Something else," said Yarrow. Her voice was very small. 8 days ago, I logged an aerospace event. A dropship put down 40 kilometers east, other side of the ridge in the mining leases. Big burn. Big ship. She would not look up. I logged it as a charter for the radium works. I didn't go and look. It's been 30 years and nothing's ever happened. I logged it and I made tea. Karsten closed his eyes. He had seen it too. He had been standing outside the Mech Bay at dusk with a cup in his hand, and he had watched a fusion torch come down out of the sky 40 kilometers away, and he had thought, mining charter, and gone inside because it was cold. 30 years of standing post, and he had stopped watching. Not last week. Years ago, he had let his eyes go soft, the way a man's eyes go soft on a road he drives every day, and something had walked up out of the ground behind his own wire, and he had made tea. "Helena," he said, "get your coat." They took the tracked hauler around the eastern shoulder, the two of them alone, with the light going. Novotny drove, because Novotny always drove, and said nothing. They came around the ridge and stopped, and Karsten got out and looked at what 400 meters of rock had hidden from him for 30 years of his life. The hillside was open. Not the door they guarded. Another door. A Star League cargo elevator 18 meters wide. Its blast shielding folded back into the hill. Its throat lit from below with cold white light. Its ramp scraped clean and running with tread marks. And a churned road going east into the dark toward the mining leases. And the dropship they had never gone to look at. And in the snow, at the mouth of it, pressed deep and enormous, were the footprints of battle mechs. Coming up, not going down. Karsten stood there a long time. "They came out of the ground," he said. "Yes, that thing at my gate. That 100-ton thing with the 4 guns and no name." He heard his own voice from a distance. "It's been under my feet. 30 years, and I've been walking a wire around it in the snow, keeping people away from it," Novotny said, quite steadily. "Yes, Lyle, we were the fence." He was suddenly, uselessly, blindingly angry. And then the anger went out of him like water from a cracked jug, and what was left was very cold and very clear. "What is it?" "The Mech. There's a machine called an Annihilator." She was looking into the elevator throat with a technician's flat professional hunger. "Star League design. Last year of the Amaris War. Built to sit in a city and never move. It was never issued. Nobody ever built one that anybody could find. The only ones anyone in the inner sphere has laid eyes on came in with Wolf's Dragoons in 3005. And nobody ever learned where the Dragoons got them." She spat into the snow. 100 tons. 21.6 kilometers per hour walking. 32.4 flat out. The slowest thing ever called a battle mech. And it doesn't matter, because it doesn't need to catch you. It puts 4 autocannon 10s into your center of mass out to 450 meters, and there is nothing in the inner sphere that stands up under that. And the other 5? I got a look at 2 of them on the scope when they came over the ridge. Then I didn't. She said it evenly, but he had known her his whole adult life, and he heard what was underneath. 65 tons. Jump capable. And they go off the board, Lyle. Not jamming, they just stop being there. And then they're 400 meters closer. Nobody has that. That is Star League stealth gear out of a hole in the ground. She turned to look at him. And 6 mechs, not 4. They don't move in lances. They move in 6s. Say the word, Helena. "Comstar," said Novotny. Karsten looked at the white light coming up out of the hill. "It doesn't change the ground," he said. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." Halfway back, Yarrow came up on the truck set, and her voice shook so badly he could hardly understand her. "Sir, the evacuation manifest came through. Read it. It's all of us. 41 names with birth dates. It's got Marchetti's daughter. It's got next of kin declarations and Corporal Ottaway's blood type. A ragged breath. It's beautiful, sir. It is the most beautiful piece of paperwork I have ever seen. Everything is correct. The dropship is named. Departure windows 900 hours tomorrow from the strip at Bantry. And I've been listening to orbit for an hour, and there is nothing up there. No burn, no beacon, no traffic. That strip hasn't had a ship on it since the harvest lift. Her voice cracked. There's no ship, sir. There's no ship coming, and there never was. Karsten watched the road. Not a bullet, not a knife. A form, filled out perfectly, blood types correct, and at the end of it, a hole in the ground, and no ship in the sky, and 41 people who had never existed anyway. Copy, he said. Then, Sana, put the kettle on. Sir, tell Helena to open the thermal bypass. All of it. Everything the plant can make, straight down the outfall pipe. Running by 2000 and running until the sun comes up. There was a pause that went on for 3 full seconds. Sir, said Yarrow, that'll rot the ice. Yes, said Karsten, it will. He gathered them in the Mech Bay at 2200 because it was the only building that would hold everyone. 41 people, 14 of them children, one asleep on her mother's shoulder with her mouth open. Karsten stood on a tool chest so they could see him. He did not make a speech, because he was not a man who made speeches, and because it would have been a lie. He had a stack of paper in his hand. He had spent 2 hours writing it out at the mess table. 41 times, and his hand had cramped, and he had kept going. This is a release, he said. 1 each. It says that as of tonight, you are discharged from the Iron Spike Brigade in good standing, with no obligation outstanding. Signed by the commanding officer. It is the only piece of paper in this compound I actually have the authority to issue. He held one up. It fluttered. There is no contract. There never was a contract. I can't hold you to something that doesn't exist, so I'm not going to. Nobody moved. The trucks leave in an hour. Everyone who isn't a mech warrior goes on them. Helena stays, because I need her on the pumps. You go north, across the moraine to Bantry, and you take the safe. When you get there, you go to the district registry, and you put it in front of the registrar, and you make him write it down, in ink, in the paper book. He looked at them. Not the terminal. They own the terminal. They cannot reach a book in a fireproof box in a mining town on a world nobody has ever cared about. Somebody near the back said, "Sir, what about you?" "I'm going to stand post," said Karsten. He got down off the tool chest. Nobody left. The trucks went out at midnight, loaded with children and cooks and clerks, and Marchetti's daughter in the safe, and Odile Sokolov's mother, who had baked bread in that compound for 30 years, went last and slowest and did not look back. Every mech warrior stayed. Every one. Karsten had known they would, and he had written the releases anyway, and afterward he understood that he had written them for himself. Then he took his officers down to the lake. Kettle Lake was 4 kilometers long. gouged out by the ice 1,000 years ago, 200 meters deep in the middle. The reclamation plant discharged into it through an outfall pipe at the northern end. Warm water. Every day. For 30 years. And Helena Novotny had drilled that ice and logged its thickness every fortnight for 29 winters. Because a technician who does not know how thick the ice is a technician who eventually loses a vehicle. She had a map of that lake in her head that nobody else possessed. Tonight the thermal bypass was wide open, and every joule the plant could make was going down that pipe into the black water under the white plate. "It won't look like anything," Novotny said. "That's the thing about rotten ice. It won't crack. It won't go gray. The wind's been polishing it a week, so it'll be white and hard and beautiful right up until it isn't." She crouched and drew in the snow with a bare finger. Warm water runs under the plate along the deep channel, north to south. By dawn, you'll have a ton of bad ice, 1,100 meters long and 400 wide, straight down the middle. 50 tons will cross it. 75 will cross it if it's moving straight and doesn't stop. She looked up. 100 tons will not. "And it can't jump," said Sokolov. "No jump jets. No hands. It walks at 21.6 kilometers per hour, and it cannot climb out of anything." Novotny stood, and her knees cracked. "If you get it out there, Lyle, it is not coming back." Karsten looked at the lake. The wind carried powder off it in long, luminous streamers under the moon. "Then that's the ground," he said. "That's all this ever was. We've had 30 years to learn one basin, and they've had 8 days. Odile, every range card we ever cut, every marker stake, every revetment we've dug and filled and dug again since before you could walk. Tonight, we use all of it. They worked until 4. They pulled the range stakes and reset them false, every marker 400 meters off, so that a machine reading the ground with fresh eyes would range on stones that lied. They dug Whitlock's hunchback into the revetment north of the gate, hull down behind a berm of frozen spoil, nothing showing but the blunt shoulder of the autocannon 20 and a slot to see through. They put Hugh Ottaway's urban mech into the old gun pit at the gate, 30 tons of squat armored insult with an autocannon 10 in its arm. And Ottaway said, "Been sitting in this hole since I was 50, and got in." And Karsten went out onto the ice, alone at 4 in the morning, on foot with a bar. He walked the line he was going to walk, and beat the ice every 10 paces, and listened to the note it gave back. It rang like a bell for 800 meters. Then it began to sound like a drum. He stood at the place where the note changed and marked it in his mind, and looked back at the compound where the lights were on and 7 mechs were being brought up to pressure by an old woman and a dead unit's worth of ghosts. He had wanted this once. When the contract was new, he had lain awake, wanting something to come over that ridge. Anything, so that his life would have a shape. It had taken him 20 years to stop wanting it, and 10 more to forget he ever had. Now it had come, and he found that he was not afraid. He was ashamed, which was different. 30 years standing a post he had stopped believing in, drawing money from a fiction, keeping a door shut for a reason he had never had the courage to ask about. He could not fix that. But there was one thing left he could still do properly, and it was the thing he had come here to do at 31 years old with a rifle on his shoulder. And it was very simple, and he had always known how. He was going to stand post. First light came the color of skimmed milk. Deering's voice was on the guard channel at 4 minutes past, and it had not changed at all. "Captain Karsten, have you anything to produce?" Karsten sat in the Marauder with the reactor humming under him. 75 tons of 200-year-old machine wrapped around him like an old coat. The cockpit smelled of ozone and dust, and the cold grease Novotny used. It smelled of every day of his life. "No," he said. "Then I'd ask you to power down, Mr. Deering." He watched the gray column come out of the murk on the eastern flat. 6 machines. The Annihilator in the center, arms already rising. A 75-ton Black Knight on its right, moving with the flat, unhurried confidence of a thing that is never lost. 2 crabs spreading wide on the flanks, and somewhere out there, 2 exterminators that his sensors swore were not there at all. "I can't produce my contract. You can't produce your authority. That makes us even." "That isn't how it works, Captain." "No," Karsten agreed, "but I'm still standing post." He put his crosshairs on the Annihilator's center of mass and did not fire, because at 700 meters he would have wasted the shot, and because he wanted them to come. Iron Spike. This is Spike Actual, weapons free. The Annihilator opened first, and the gate ceased to exist. 4 autocannon 10s fired together at 430 meters, and the rusted panels and the board that Wendell Aubrey had painted in the first winter came apart into a cloud of hot metal, and the shock went through the frozen ground and into Karsten's spine. Then Hugh Ottaway, 30 tons, dug into a gun pit, put an autocannon 10 straight into that 100-ton chest at 300 meters, and made a scar the size of a dinner table, and did no other damage at all. "Spike 7, Ottaway said cheerfully. "Gate's a bit breezy. Copy 7. The crabs came in fast on the left, 50 tons apiece. A large laser in each arm, not a gram of ammunition between them, and clearly unaccustomed to fighting anything that knew the ground. Their first ranging shots went into a stone marker 400 meters short of Sokolov's Wolverine. "They're eating the steaks," Sokolov said, delighted and savage. Spike 2, engaging. 55 tons of Wolverine came out of the vehicle park at 54 kilometers per hour, jumped 150 meters over the fuel bund, and put 6 short-range missiles into the lead crab's flank at 90 meters. And everyone struck. Salcedo's Vindicator stepped out through the vegetable house, through Ines Salcedo's own tomatoes. Karsten heard her make a small, wounded noise, and put a particle cannon bolt through the same machine's shoulder. Marchetti's Panther came off the barracks roof and hit it with another. The crab went down on one knee and did not get up. That was the last easy thing that happened. The exterminators arrived from behind. There was no warning of any kind. Nothing on any scope, nothing on thermal. And then two 65-ton machines came over the western wire in a 180-meter jump and landed in the middle of the compound and immediately opened fire with 4 medium lasers each. Nev Petrakis was 19 years old and doing 129.6 kilometers per hour between the barracks and a 20-ton locust, and she saw them because she was looking with her eyes and not with the scope. Behind us, 2 heavies in the wire. The locust took a laser through the left leg and went down and slid 40 meters on its side and came to rest against the pump house, and Karsten's throat closed. Then her voice came back, thin and furious. "I'm out. I'm running." "Don't wait for me." "Spike 3, said Karsten. "Yep," said Aldo Whitlock. The hunchback came up out of the revetment like something dug out of the ground, which was what it was, and the Black Knight had walked past it at 110 meters without ever knowing it was there. And Aldo Whitlock put an autocannon 20 round into its back, 185 millimeters at 110 meters, into the rear armor of a 75-ton machine. The Black Knight staggered forward and turned, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. 20 heat sinks, a particle cannon, 2 large lasers, 4 mediums, and it brought every weapon it had onto a 50-ton hunchback at 100 meters and fired all of it. The hunchback's left arm came off. Its left torso opened like a tin. Whitlock fired again. 20 more points into a chest already glowing, and the Black Knight went down onto its face and did not move. And then the fire from the Black Knight found the 2 tons of autocannon ammunition that the designers of the HBK-4G had, in their wisdom, put into the left torso and nowhere else. The blast rolled across the compound and took out the mech bay windows. 3, said Karsten. 3. Nothing. Aldo. Nothing. The Annihilator was 200 meters from the gate and walking through it. Karsten took his Marauder out onto the frozen shore of Kettle Lake and stopped there, in the open, where every gun on that field could see him. "Escrow Actual. This is Karsten. I'm on the lake. Come and process me." Deering did not answer, but the Annihilator turned. It turned the way a building would turn. It came around through the ruin of the gate and through the wire, and down the shallow grade to the shore, and out onto the ice. And behind it, Ottaway's urban mech fired and fired and fired, until the Annihilator swung 2 guns backward and put an end to the gun pit. Hugh Ottaway, who had been on time for every watch for 30 years, was not late for this one either. Karsten walked backward onto the lake. He had one job now, and it was arithmetic. And the arithmetic was cruel. The Annihilator's autocannons reached 450 meters. His particle cannons reached 540. In that 90-meter band, he could hit it, and it could not touch him, and he could hold that band forever, because he walked at 43.2 kilometers per hour, and it walked at 21.6, which meant it would simply stop. It would stand where the ice was a meter thick and watch him dance out of range, and then it would turn around and go and kill his people at the gate. A machine that is never touched does not follow. So he stopped walking and let it come inside 450 meters and let it touch him. He fired both particle cannons at 430 meters, and the cockpit temperature went up like a struck match. 20 points of heat into 16 heat sinks, and the difference had to go somewhere. And it went into the air and into his lungs, and into the sweat that ran down into his eyes and stung. He fired again. The bolts cracked into that pristine gray chest and left long black weeping scars, and the Annihilator came on at 21.6 kilometers per hour, patient as a debt. Then it fired, and it was very good, and Karsten's world came apart. The first and second rounds hammered his left arm, chewing through armor and shattering the ball and socket joint, and the particle cannon went spinning away across the ice, trailing coolant. The third hit the torso, and the valiant lamellar armor peeled off in sheets and blew past his canopy. The fourth sheared the linkage on his dorsal autocannon, the famous one, the one every Marauder pilot in history had cursed, and the autocannon. 5 died on its mount. He was down to 1 particle cannon, 1 medium laser, and about 4 minutes. He backed away, and it followed, because now it was winning and it knew it. Spike Actual, Spike 2. Sokolov breathing hard. Second crab is down. The exterminators are standing off. They're just watching. He knew why, and it made him want to laugh. They were not engaging because the reviewing officer had it in hand, and because the cost of pressing an engagement rises every minute. And somewhere in that gray man's head was a column of figures. 2. Nobody comes onto the ice. That's an order, Odio. It's the last one. He fired at 300 meters, and the heat came up and the temperature warning began to sound. That flat idiot chime. And he ignored it. The Annihilator hit him twice more. Something went in the right leg. The Marauder took on a limp, and the limp got worse, and the world tilted 8 degrees and stayed there, and he could not have outrun a walking man. He crossed the place where the note changed. He heard it change under his own feet, and then the Annihilator stopped. Karsten felt it in his own feet before he understood it. The ice had begun to talk. A long groan under 100 tons, then a crack like a rifle shot running away north under the snow, and the machine standing on it was piloted by a careful man. A man who filled in forms correctly. A man who did not take risks he had not costed. The Annihilator took one enormous step backward, and another. And Karsten understood, with a calm he would not have believed possible, exactly how this ended. 100 tons walking backward at 21.6 kilometers per hour would be off the rotten ice in about 90 seconds. Then it would stand on ground that held, and kill everything on that field at its leisure. And 30 years and 29 winters of ice logs, and a whole night of warm water under the plate would have bought precisely nothing. Because the man in the gray coat had felt the floor move, and had simply decided not to be there. 90 seconds. Karsten did not think about it at all. He pushed the throttle to the stop, and the Marauder came up out of its limp and ran. The book said a Marauder ran at 64.8 kilometers per hour. Karsten did not have 64.8. He had a torn leg and a 200-year-old gyro, and whatever was left in a machine older than he was. And he took all of it, and it was enough. Because 75 tons arriving at speed is a quantity of violence no armor was ever designed to be asked about. He crossed 300 meters of rotten ice with the alarm screaming and both eyes open, and he did not fire once on the way, because he did not need to. The Annihilator put 2 rounds into him. They went somewhere. It did not matter. Spike. Actual. Sokolov screaming. Lyle! Lyle, get off the ice! The Marauder hit the Annihilator square in the chest at full running speed. The impact threw Karsten forward against his straps hard enough to break something in him, and the cockpit filled with the shriek of the frame folding, and 100 tons of Star League machine went backward with 75 tons driving it. And the ice beneath them both, 30 centimeters thick and full of warm water, and eating itself all night. Let go. It let go all at once, across 1,100 meters, with a sound like the world clearing its throat. They went in together. Kettle Lake was 200 meters deep. The water came up around the canopy in a black wall, and Karsten watched it come with a kind of remote interest. The Marauder's reactor tried and failed, and the lights dropped to emergency red. The cold came through the breached torso in a rush that had no temperature at all, only weight. Below him and against him, locked to him by 3 tons of buckled steel, the Annihilator went down nose first into the glacial black, and it did not fire, and it did not struggle, and it went the way an anvil goes. Karsten keyed the comms one last time. It still worked. It was a Dalban set, and Dalban made a good radio, and he had always said so. Iron Spike. Spike actual. The water was at the canopy line. There was static, and then Odile Sokolov's voice came through it, and she had stopped screaming, and she said the words the way you say them. Flat and formal and correct, the way they are supposed to be said at the changing of a watch. Spike actual. This is Spike 2. I relieve you. Lyle Karsten smiled. I stand relieved, he said. The lake closed over him. The 2 surviving exterminators stood at the edge of the broken ice for 1 minute and 40 seconds. Sokolov held her crosshairs on the nearer of them the whole time, and neither of them fired. Then they turned, both together, without a word on any channel, and walked back east through the wreckage of the gate and up the shoulder of Aubrey Ridge and away, and the command track and the haulers went with them. They did not hurry. They did not look back. By noon, the fusion torch of a dropship was climbing out of the eastern sky. They didn't lose, Sokolov said afterward, standing in the ruin with her helmet under her arm. They just stopped. No, said Helena Novotny. They lost. They're leaving without us, and we're still here. They counted at 1,400. Aldo Whitlock, Hugh Ottaway, Lyle Karsten, 2 ground crew who had refused the trucks and stayed to run ammunition, and whose names went on to the death roll in Novotny's tiny handwriting, making 27 names in 4 hands. They laid the tarps in the snow outside the Mech bay and weighted the corners with wrenches, and nobody said very much. Ines Salcedo walked into the ruin of the vegetable house, picked 1 green tomato out of the wreckage, held it, and put it in her pocket. They found the annex open. Whoever had come up out of that hill had not gone back down. They had gone east to their ship with what they came for, and they had left the great cargo elevator standing open, because there was no longer any reason on any world to close it. Sokolov and Novotny went down. The depot ran 900 meters into the ridge, cold and dry, lit by strips that still worked after 260 years. It held 411 battle mech cradles, nearly all empty since before the succession wars began. 17 had not been empty at the start of the month. 11 of those were empty now. The other 6 held machines under gray shrouds, and Novotny lifted a corner of one shroud and stood there a while and put it back. The plate at the bottom of the ramp was brass, and someone had polished it once, a very long time ago. Star League Defense Force 3rd Army. Forward Materiel Depot, Gladstone. They found the file room on the 2nd level. Steel cabinets, a desk, a chair. On the desk was a folder that had been left out because somebody had been reading it recently and had been in a hurry. The folder was labeled Reclamation Annex 9, a security element. Inside was the original of a contract dated the 11th of June, 3009, signed by Colonel Wendell Aubrey in a big, careless hand, and beneath his name, in a neat one, the signature of an officer of the Board of Reclamation. And clipped behind it, on the same heavy paper, dated the same day, in the same neat hand, was Annex 9. Sokolov read it, standing up. 2 pages. It set out the provisions for the release, disarmament, transport, and final disposition of the security element. It specified that the element would be composed of personnel without registry, without kin of record, and without means of independent return. It specified that closure would be executed upon completion of the reclamation, at the discretion of the reviewing officer, and that all associated records would be reconciled. And in the schedule at the back, under fixed site assets, between the pumping plant and the perimeter fence, it listed the Iron Spike Brigade, 12 battle mechs, 60 personnel, 1 land parcel, with a book value and a depreciation curve running to 0 over 30 years. 30 years within the quarter. Odile Sokolov stood in a 260-year-old file room under a hill on Small World and read the date on which her life had been scheduled to end, written down before she was born, by a man who had never met her, in very good handwriting. Then she closed the folder and took it out of the ground. She drove to Bantry the next morning, 200 kilometers north across the moraine, alone, with the folder and the safe on the seat beside her. The district registry occupied 2 rooms above a hardware store and was staffed by 1 man. The paper ledgers went back to 2904, and they were kept in a fireproof box because the town had burned twice. He was not a young man, and he did not startle easily, and he listened to all of it without once interrupting. Then he opened the current ledger, turned it around so she could see, and unscrewed the cap of a pen. Unit name, he said. Iron Spike Brigade. Date of arrival on this world, 11th of June, 3009. Contracting party. Sokolov thought about that for a moment. None, she said. Right, none. write that the contracting party could not be produced. The registrar wrote it. His handwriting was small and very clear. Commanding officer of record. She had to stop. The wind came off the moraine and moved the window in its frame. And downstairs somebody dropped a box of nails. And Odile Sokolov, who had been born in a barracks on a parcel of crown land that did not exist, put her hand flat on the counter and said it. "Karsten," she said. "Lyle Karsten, Captain." And the registrar wrote it down. It came to 11 lines of ink in a paper book, in a fireproof box, above a hardware store, in a mining town on a cold world at the wrong end of the Sarna March. It could not be reached from orbit. It could not be transmitted, or intercepted, or reconciled, or closed. It said that they had come, and that they had stayed, and that they had been paid by nobody for 30 years, and that on the 14th of March, 3039, the Iron Spike Brigade had held its ground at Reclamation Annex 9 against an enemy it could not name, and that 5 of its people had been killed there. It gave their names. In the spring, the lake thawed at its edges and froze again, and by the second winter the ice over the broken place had healed and was as white and hard and beautiful as the rest of it, and you could walk across it and never know. 200 meters down, in the black and the cold, 100 tons of Star League steel that had waited 260 years in the dark to be terrible for one morning lay on the floor of Kettle Lake with a 75-ton Marauder locked against its chest. And neither of them would ever be recovered. And neither of them would ever be listed anywhere by anyone. Lyle Karsten had stood a post for 30 years that nobody had ordered, under a contract that did not exist, for an employer who had written his death warrant on the day he was hired. And at the end of it, when it counted, he had done the job properly, and somebody had come at last to relieve him.